Hi everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. We hope you're going to get quite a bit out of this. We're going to be talking about pricing strategy killing your bottom line.
First of all, who are we? We're representing Profit Systems. Our roots go back a long ways. Family was in the furniture business starting in 1897. They did not begin writing software at that point. Some 35 years ago, they began writing software using IBM punch cards in an effort to try and control their inventory and do some predictions about what might be working for them. Today, Profit Systems has a family of over 1,000 clients with tens of thousands of users out in the field, some of them locally installed, running networks within their own operation, and others are running in our cloud environment. I am Lee Rochelle with Profit Systems Customer Relations. My background includes over 20 years of managing retail stores. I've been with Profit Systems since 2000. And with me is Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jameson Leffler. I go by Jamie. I do the implementation here at Profit Systems. My background is I actually used to be a regional director underneath the owner of pharmacies across 48 of the 50 states. I did the entire West Coast, so I did a lot of traveling, a lot of sales, a lot of accounting, and before that I was the office manager of a furniture store. So today, just to let you know, set some expectations, the presentation will be around 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less. Q&A after. We do move quickly through it, so that's why we have the email on there in case you have any questions after the fact. Through the Q&A box, we'll try to hit some of your questions with answers as we're going along. And then if we see a lot of the same types of questions, we'll kind of compile them and cover it in the end. Also, this is recorded, so you'll get it at the end, so that way you can have other people watch it as well. So, Lee, what can we expect from this presentation?
What we're hoping, and again, I want to thank all of you for joining us. We had a phenomenal turnout, a rather impressive turnout. we're thrilled that you would want to spend some time with us today. But what we're hoping is to share why having a pricing model can pay off big. And everything that we're referring to here today talks about getting more money on the bottom line. We're going to talk a little bit about when is a good time to reprice, and we're going to talk about automating the pricing, and are there opportunities out there for you to take some of that burden off of the Excel spreadsheets and the manual lists that you're working with already. So we're going to talk about how to price things right and maximize your gross margin. One of the things to give us a bit of an overview onto what a lot of retailers that we talk to are struggling with is the impact of the new economy. Back in 2006, I was giving a presentation at one of our user conferences in Las Vegas, and I was fascinated by an article that was in Furniture Today that morning, the morning I was to give the presentation. They were highlighting 6 stores in the Chicago market that had closed. And it was a profound analysis. What they were referring to in most cases were the number one issues that the stores were dealing with was actually deflation. You know, we talk about inflation an awful lot, but as we all know, during that period of time is when a lot of outsourcing came along. You know, I used to buy a nightstand for $49. I sold it for $99. Now I can get a nightstand for $19. What should I do with the retail price? And so pricing models became much more important. What we learned when we were working with retailers back then, and what we've learned with working with retailers since then, is that everyone has a different pricing model. So what are the pricing models? Some folks use a cost plus. Some guys are eyeballing the goods and determining what they think they can get for it. Some of them simply drive around town, stop in at the competition. He's at $99, I need to be at $89. And some of them are using the old profit wheel. When I was traveling as a consultant with the company when I first started back in 2000, I would dig around in the owner's desk and on a bet that I could find a profit wheel inside that desk somewhere and well, I won the bet a lot of times. A lot of folks are still using it.
You know, it's interestingly, we have so many retailers that come to us and they just don't have a system for this. It's amazing how many of them, you know, they are all over the place when it comes to this, and they don't have anything set in stone. This is how we're going to do it.
You know, they're looking for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there is no black and white. I will tell you that the folks who have survived and are in our stable of clients, and there are, as we talked about, there's over 1,000 of them, the ones that are aggressively going after business and surviving and putting money on the bottom line, they're using a combination of techniques, but they don't include fixed markup routines. This is one thing that they rarely use. Most of them are using a private label approach in some fashion wherever they can. Eyeballing the goods. Let's go back to that nightstand. The guy who decided to go and get it from overseas and pay $19 for it instead of $49, he is going to keep it someplace close to where he had it before because that's what the customer thinks it's worth. He's smart enough to realize that if I was selling it at $99 before, maybe I can look like a hero and sell it for $89. But if I use my the 50% margin rule, I'm going to be down here somewhere around what, $40? I can't sell twice as many of these, and even if I do, I'm going to have twice the expense in delivering them. And this is what happened to the 6 retailers in Chicago. All of a sudden, they had great, grandiose ideas that they were going to be price leaders. Some of them had other issues, but the overall crux of the article was they were going to be price leaders. I'll take this discounted merchandise, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to beat the pants off everybody else. Well, there wasn't enough margin left, and there wasn't enough velocity in the lower priced goods to pay the bills. Model number encryption. I'm going to let Jamie pick that up after I get done, but I just want to share a story that'll give you an idea of how one of the things I used to do when I was in retail. Many of you are familiar with the line Wildwood Accessories, Wildwood lamp. Back in the 80s and early 90s, the Wildwood people were competing with another company called Maitland Smith. We carried Maitland Smith in our stores because the ones that I ran were all high-end design shops. And so I started buying Wildwood, which nobody in the marketplace knew anything about. Customers certainly didn't know who Wildwood was. Took all their labeling information off, and we called it our brand, put our store label on it. My pricing model for that product was 3.5 times cost. That was the suggested retail, and we sold it at 3 times cost. And I had friends in the retail business who'd come into the store that were also carrying Wildwood, and they'd say, "You got to be kidding me. You're getting $3.49 for that lamp? What are you, nuts?" I said, "No, it's my number 2 seller. Look at it. It's a gorgeous lamp." And so early on, we broke out of the paradigms of, you know, I'm going to use the wheel. I'd always like to get a 52 if I could, but I'll take 45, and if I end up at 43 with discounts, I'm okay with that. I never believed in that. And so while we're talking about our pricing model here, keep in mind there is no rule. The eyeballing method for a lot of folks is they're so good at it, this is what kept them solvent.
So with this last point here, the model number encryption, it's an interesting thing to take a look at because I can't tell you how many of our retailers have all of their item information on price tags and sales and signs around the store, things like that. The problem is that then what you're doing is you're empowering the customer with that information to then go somewhere else because they know, okay, so I get this kind of deal at that store, let's go online, or let's go to this other store and see if they have the same product. If you have a system to have salespeople have this information, but not customers, it creates an environment where customers can't price shop. You want to create that environment where they know that they're going into your store and they're going to be getting the deal that they want.
Perfect.
Which leads us to, what about your current inventory?
We're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit as we move along here on a drill of what we might do with a pricing model for new goods coming into the store. But included in talking about pricing is before you start establishing, okay, I want to have a rule, I'm going to do this with this vendor, I'm going to do that with this category or whatever, keep in mind you've got two things going on simultaneously, and these are the kinds of things that just suck up so much energy, so much time if you don't have this automated. But what about the merchandise I've got on hand? What about markdowns? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have an automatic alert that tells me this item's not selling? Wouldn't it be great to have a process that I set the schedule for, and I say, you know what, when it's this old, I want to take this much off, and when it's this old, I want to take this much off? It eliminates the need for store-wide sales, because if I can have product that's individually marked down because it's not performing very well, I'm showing my customers I've got great value without taking my best sellers and marking them down. I used to run into this all the time on the road. The guy would have a store-wide sale. He's got his flex steel top recliner marked 25% off. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, I'm having a store-wide sale. I have to show it's no, you don't. You don't have to do anything. There's no rules. The other thing that is important is for folks who do carry some inventory. Let's say I've got 4 of something, and one of them's damaged, and I want to sell it as damaged. I used to run into this frequently. The salesperson writes it up as the damaged item. The guys in the warehouse look at the ticket and they go, well, yeah, I got this right here. It's on the shelf. And they take the one out of the box and they deliver it. And so having a system that allows anybody that's looking at the inventory to say, you know what, I've got a customer that's looking at this piece. They're price sensitive. I understand that. Do I have an opportunity to do anything here without just pulling down my pants on the price? Oh, look, I've got one in stock. It's got a scratch on the left side. Let's go look at it and see if this might work in their environment. Maybe that scratch on the left side is not a big deal. It's going to be up against a wall. So having visibility to the items that I as a manager have marked down because of specific issues means I can move those pieces off faster. My salesperson looks like he's really on the ball, and I build credibility with my customer. I'm marking it down because it has an issue, not just because you asked me to.
You know, something to keep in mind when you're thinking about markdowns is what you're doing is you're compiling a list of showing, okay, these are the items that they're simply not moving. But with that list of markdowns, what you really need to think of it as is a list of opportunities. Because at the end of the day, there is a value to the product. You don't want to give up on it. All you want to do is you need to find that value of the product.
Wow. I have to temper my enthusiasm here, because what Jamie just said is fascinating. If I'm anticipating, I'm hoping for X margin on my merchandise, and so I hang on to it, and after a while, it dawns on me that it's not selling, so I go out there and I go, this thing's not selling, half off. Mm-hmm. What Jamie's referring to is, what about a process of saying, let's go 10% off after it's so old, and you know what? It starts to sell, and based on the velocity of sales, what I've done is I've found that sweet spot. It's not my target margin necessarily, but if you rank your inventory, if you look at your inventory based on GMROI as opposed to just gross margin, you'll find some amazing things. Oftentimes you'll wonder why something all of a sudden took off. Well, we've had it around for so long, but I marked it down $50 and we sold all 6 of them. Good golly, I want to get rid of it. If you were to take that performance of that item and say, okay, the average inventory on hand was X, and my annualized gross profit for that item was X, and work the formula of dividing the inventory into the gross margin dollars, you'll come up with what we call GMROI. In establishing your pricing model, using a GMROI figure as opposed to a gross margin figure is going to give you a much better feel for the performance of the item. We've got retailers who are running 28% gross margin on some things and getting a $3 GMROI. They've got other things in their store that they're getting a 50% gross margin on. They're getting $1.50. And historically, anything under $1.60 is just a waste of time. So if your goal is to increase your GMROI, it may be a function of velocity and a lower price, The other side of it is if I see something that's got a relatively high GMROI, I can take a look at that vendor, that category, whatever it is that I'm focusing on at that point, and I can say to myself, you know what, at $6.99, this thing is just flying out of here. Can I do $7.49? Can I do $7.99? Because having the right price doesn't necessarily mean taking the price down. You might have an opportunity to increase margin there.
After saying all that, really what you're looking forward to is what can you do? Because, we've kind of pointed out and touched on some things lately about where you're at currently. So the question can be, now what? Now what do we do? Which leads us to setting the goals.
And I can't emphasize enough, you've taken time out of your day to join us. We certainly appreciate that. Obviously, we've mentioned tools that are available in the Profit System software that help our retailers accomplish the things that we've talked about. But whether you're in a good data management system or not, take a piece of paper and write down the top category or your favorite category or the category that you have the most inventory on hand. Pick a criteria. Write down what that collection of goods is, and then go back and tear it apart. Ask yourself, can I raise the price a little bit here? Am I at the right margin for this market, for this piece? What if I took the identification off of it? What if we called it John's Furniture Store Sofas? If you want any idea of how important labeling is to a client, you might try an exercise. Go into the want ads in your local paper where people sell furniture. You'll be surprised how many times they'll tell you that they have a Havertys sofa for sale, or they have a bedroom set from Rooms to Go. They don't really know who made it in most cases. The customer is trusting you. They're trusting you to be fair. They're trusting you to give them a value that makes sense to them. But don't just give it away. The big box guys, we've got some retailers that are getting 60% margins and selling things like gangbusters. Why? Because they've carved out a niche. They've figured out that they can make this work. So setting goals means taking the time to write something down and follow it through.
So this is what we really like to handle with our dealings with clients. These are the kind of questions that we like to ask our clients. What are your goals? How much better can your pricing model be? And how much more money can you make on this same inventory that you already have? It's always interesting because through our subsequent conversations with some of these clients, it's really a lot of fun to see that they're making these improvements and they're very excited about it. So it's certainly not a quick solution by any means, but it's something that is definitely worthwhile. So really what we're trying to emphasize is to work on your business, not just in your business. And like I said, this is what we like to do the most. When retailers are coming to us, not just for help on day-to-day, but I mean, of course, there's always going to be those day-to-day questions. But when they are actively working to improve, those are the types of people that are not satisfied with the status quo. And those are the ones that we really enjoy helping because we know that at the end of the day, they're already doing well because they're here. They just want to do better.
And exactly. I can't tell you. Oh, I could probably count them. The number of times that I've been in stores with watching an owner walking around with a clipboard trying to figure out what to mark down, what to mark up. When we talk about having a plan, you know, it's a structure of taking the elephant and breaking it into small bites. Physical inventory is the same thing. You can take it and break it into small bites. Having a plan of reviewing and assess the information that you have, whatever method you have of keeping your information together. Maybe start with one vendor. The other piece of it is to commit to a schedule. Take a week out of the month, a day out of the week, and sit down uninterrupted and say to yourself, okay, I'm going to take this category, this vendor, this collection, whatever, and I'm going to make sure that I'm priced where I need to be. Now, one of the things that makes doing these activities a lot more fun is if you've got some automated, tools at your disposal where you can just tell the system, hey, you know what? I think I can take everything here up by 10%. So let's add 10% to the current selling price. Let's round it off to a number that I like so that it matches my merchandising model on my floor, and let's just take a look and see what happens. Let's watch it for a while, and then be able to run reports that say, okay, it's still selling, it's slowed down, it's done this, it's done that. But take a look at your pricing. So many retailers are committed to a pricing model that says, I have to be at a 45, I have to be here, I have to be there. As we talked about real early in the presentation, that deflation thing and people working on a fixed margin, whew, boy, it was brutal. Take not only that, but take into account that once we started buying containers, instead of having 30 days to pay for it, I had to pay for it before I even got it. Now I had to buy 20 of them instead of 14 or 10 or 5. So keeping an eye on this pricing and making sure the cash flow is where it can be, where it should be, instead of just using a model that may have been inherited over years and years, is important. It's just as important as managing the expenses in the warehouse, managing the sales staff to make sure you've got the best people out there.
Now, Lee, this is the part we have to assign them some homework. But what we did was we set the expectation for just the next 2 hours. And the reason why this is so important is because this is a massive undertaking. And I know that we're really throwing a lot at you here, but if you follow these steps here, you'll realize that, you know what, this was actually pretty simple. And once you start to see the benefit of going through these steps, you're actually going to see the advantage of doing it. And then you're going to want to devote more time to it and more time to it. And before you know it, you've already got a whole list of winners and losers based on all your vendors, all your categories, and you're making these changes, and it's going to benefit your whole entire store.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's important to mention here as well, for most of our clients who come to us from a manual system or maybe they've got something else they've been using, one of the things that kind of falls through the cracks while you're looking at this, if we're taking a favorite vendor or we're taking a category or we're taking some small bite of the elephant, the information that's easy for us to get our hands on is what's selling. We've all got metrics that reflect, I sold so many of these, I had this much margin. I can come up with the GMROI. It's a manual calculation. It's not rocket surgery. But keep in mind when you're looking at your pricing schedule, you've got things out there that aren't selling. And you need to have a way to be able to bring those to the front of the page and say, okay, now wait a minute. The 80-20 rules kicked in here. I've got 20% of my goods that are paying most of my bills, but I do have a lot of stuff that's just not moving. Is it not moving because it's not in the right spot? Or maybe I just have to tweak the price a little. I've actually seen people, and I actually did this in the last store that I ran, which was a very high-end contemporary store. We raised some prices just on a whim because we just couldn't understand why this piece wasn't selling. It just was so dramatic, so wonderful, so great. When we raised the price, all of a sudden, the connection got made in the customer's mind. This individual was selling us a piece of goods that was worth far more, and it had everything that matched that higher price. It had good quality, it had great style, it sat well. And so the eyeball method and your experience as retailers will be a much more effective guide in getting through this than just getting out the wheel or using a formula. So when we talk about a pricing model, take it in small pieces, take a look at both the things that are selling and the things that are not selling, and once you've made your decisions, start setting aside time and go after it again. But I'll guarantee you in 2 hours you should be able to come up with an answer as to whether or not you're priced correctly for whichever vendor or category you pick.
Absolutely. So we have reached the end, everybody. I really hope that this was helpful for you. I know we probably have some questions that we need to answer, but really the biggest takeaway here is that, like we said before, there is no black and white. I mean, what works for one store might not work for the other store, but as long as we can get you thinking about it and get you actively working in your inventory what you actually have and what's not selling. That's what we're trying to aim for here. And so we hope that you have the tools to be able to do that, and that's something that we can help you with as well.
Absolutely. We've had a third person on with us, Director of Education Terry Ann, who's been answering the questions on the side. It appears she has taken care of the questions that were out there.
All right.
Identified them and answered them correctly.
Fantastic.
Or effectively. psiinfo@acellos.com. You can contact us at that email address with questions if they come up after you leave the session or at any point in time. We would look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.